Well, let's have a look at the morning papers now, the Sunday papers and the news websites. And we're joined this morning by Stuart Hughes, who's the BBC World Affairs correspondent, who's been standing in regularly for us during lockdown, and also the journalist, author Tim Hartley. Stuart, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, you can't escape Dominic Cummings in the Sunday papers, and they do say that political advisers should never allow themselves to become the story. But that's exactly what the Prime Minister's chief advisor has done. His face appears on the front page of many of this morning's papers, dressed in casually in sweatpants and an orange T-shirt. And the reason he features so prominently is, of course, due to what the Sunday People calls his comings and goings, rather like a political version of I Spy. There seems to be a second wave of sightings of the lesser-spotted Cummings in Durham, amid claims that he broke the lockdown rules by going to Durham, Cummings insisting he's done nothing wrong and made the journey to look after his son. On the one hand, where Dominic Cummings was and what he was doing may seem unimportant in the grand scheme of things, but the Sunday papers believe it's a significant error of judgment, and the Observer condemns those who've rallied to Mr Cummings' defence. It says in its leader columns, ministers are revealing an ugly truth. They're willing to undermine the government's entire pandemic strategy in order to save their colleague's job, and the Observer believes that it's a disgrace. The Mail on Sunday wonders whether the story is a political hit job by enemies of Mr Cummings. There are certainly plenty of those in Westminster. It says it's no coincidence that news of the lockdown bust was broken by two Labour-supporting newspapers, The Guardian and The Mirror. One Conservative MP tells the Mail, you can't help wondering whether dark forces have been at play to exact their revenge. The question now, which I'm sure will be chewed over in the Sunday talk shows in the hours to come, can Mr Cummings survive? Andrew Rawnsley has a succinct summary that Boris Johnson is going to be making a brutal calculation over whether to save Dominic Cummings' skin. Andrew Rawnsley says Boris Johnson's only core commitment is to himself. There's no such thing as the undying loyalty of this Prime Minister. Dominic Cummings will have the full support of Boris Johnson until he suddenly doesn't.
Yes, Tim, come in on this one. I mean, it strikes me that the danger to the government here is that, Dominic Cummings is a man who likes railing against the Westminster elite. Well, if ever there was an example of someone behaving like the rules didn't apply to them, if these new accusations are true, then it's Dominic Cummings.
Yes, there's something rather rarefied in these people discussing Cummings as if he's a friend and a colleague. And interestingly, doing the rounds yesterday was an article by his wife, Mary Wakefield, in The Spectator. And this dates back to the 23rd of April. But she was writing about how they were both coping with the virus during lockdown. And she said, after the uncertainty of the bug itself, we emerged from quarantine into the almost comical uncertainty of London lockdown. So hang on a minute now. They were in London caring for their children as they emerged from lockdown. The whole thing reeks of inconsistencies and trying to cover up. And it really is awful. But fair play to the Observer in their editorial. They do go a little bit on the personal side. Let's not forget people are actually dying while we're talking about backstabbing and political bubbles in Westminster or elsewhere. And they compare Cummings' behaviour with the death of a 13-year-old boy in Brixton, the very same day as Durham police spoke apparently to Cummings' family. Ismail Mohammed Abdul Wahab died alone and his family couldn't attend his funeral. And the Observer says this is not just Westminster tittle-tattle. It's far more serious than that. It goes to the heart of the credibility of the government's pandemic response. It reeks of breathtaking arrogance and a callous disregard for the welfare of NHS and care staff. I think that's something we need to remember in this. When we talk about these political stories, there are real people here.
Stuart, we've got more lockdown stories.
More lockdown stories in the Sunday Telegraph, more lockdown stories in all the papers, but I picked up on a story in the Sunday Telegraph, which asks whether the 2 months we've all been staying home, protecting the NHS and saving lives, well, most of us, that is, apart from maybe Dominic Cummings, whether it could have been for nothing. The Sunday Telegraph quotes a Nobel laureate scientist, Michael Levitt from Stanford University, who states, I think lockdown saved no lives. It's important to point out, Professor Levitt's an expert in chemistry. He's not an epidemiologist, but he believes that coronavirus was never going to explode in the large numbers that researchers predicted in the early stages of the crisis. And he says, for reasons that weren't clear to me, I think the leaders panicked and the people panicked. There was a huge lack of discussion. And he goes on, there's no doubt you can stop an epidemic with lockdown, but it's a very blunt and medieval weapon, and the epidemic could have been stopped just as effectively with other sensible measures such as masks and social distancing. Also in the Sunday Telegraph, an industrialist and Conservative Party donor, Alexander Temerko, calls for an end to the restrictions and a new slogan. He says if lockdown continues, we'll see more businesses fail and a looting of the government coffers. That new slogan he's calling for, lift the lockdown, protect jobs, save the economy.
Tim?
Yes, I mean, everybody's suffering from this, aren't they? And the Observer again marks key cultural institutions under threat. The National Theatre, the Royal Shakespeare Company and the Royal Opera House. And here in Cardiff, of course, we've had the Wales Millennium Centre. They're all facing financial collapse because of the pandemic. And they're asking, like everyone else, for a government lifeline. Greg Doran, the artistic director of the RSC, says it's really serious now. And if we lose our performance culture, we lose it for good. Rufus Norris, then, the artistic director of the National Theatre, says the continued social distancing means most theatres are no longer viable businesses. And I think if we look at, everyone says, when are the pubs going to open, when are the theatres going to open, restaurants and the like, and are they going to be viable businesses? You know, we heard of mannequins being put in restaurants so that you couldn't literally sit with more than two people at a table. You know, how is this going to actually come out and how is it going to change? And are these performance venues particularly going to be viable in the future?
Big questions and no one knows the answers, one suspects. Stuart?
Yeah, I picked up on Tim's story as well. It's interesting when you think about the millions of people who reportedly have been watching theatre performances online during lockdown. A lot of the theatres have been putting on plays online, and people have been going to them in droves. So it does go to show that the artistic life is not something that's just a cornerstone or an afterthought in our national life. It is really important to people. People do seek that artistic influence in their lives, and the Sunday Telegraph has a sort of slightly lighter twist on artistic concerns, because if and when some of those theatres can reopen, it seems that air kisses and cries of "darling" will have to take place from a safer distance. The Sunday Telegraph reporting that the curtain will have to come down on flamboyant greeting between lovies backstage. The paper says that in an attempt to reopen theatre venues, Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber's theatre company is looking at the example of South Korea. There, a backstage protocol means that members of the cast can't greet each other with hugs and kisses, and signing autographs at the backstage is prohibited. So when the theatres reopen, it seems like the actors and actresses are going to have to get used to a different way of greeting themselves.
Tim, what else have you seen?
Well, it's interesting that you can't, kiss your lovey-doveys in the theatre or whatever, because the footballers, I don't know whether you noticed, the Bundesliga came back. I'm missing my football. And apparently when you celebrate a goal, of course, you can't go on and hug people and, everybody's cheering. There's no one there to cheer. I am sorry for sports journalists, particularly during this pandemic, because what on earth have they got to write about? The TV stations have resorted to rerunning epic football and rugby games. But print journalists, well, they've been left with speculation. Now, okay, you'd say there's no change there. When will football restart? Will there be rule changes? There was talk, wasn't there, of shortened halves and no heading of the ball and the like. The Sunday Mirror, though, has a marvellous piece of football trivia to keep them going. Fed-up fans can finally celebrate as prices for replica footy kits set to tumble by a third due to economic crisis. This story, they say, is an exclusive because fans can finally celebrate as Manchester United tops will fall from £65 to £45, with junior sizes set to fall by a similar amount.
Still outrageous for a bit of nylon, isn't it? There we go. I've never understood the economics of football. I don't think anyone else has. Stuart?
Yeah, I'm just a question for Tim. Presumably the Cardiff City shirts, they can't give away at the best of times, can they? Yeah. Tim.
Interesting you say that, because as a season ticket holder, Vaughan may know about this, you get a little bonus of £20 at the end of the season. Guess how much they're selling them off for? £20. I think it's called stock clearance.
Stuart.
During my daily walks in the park and in the fields near my home, I've often said to my family, wouldn't it be lovely to have a dog, when the sun's shining and you're out in the open air? It seems I'm not alone. According to the Sunday Times, if you were to ask how much is that doggy in the window, the answer would be £4,000. The Sunday Times says... Indeed so. The Sunday Times says breeders are putting up their prices because of increased demand from people who are suffering from loneliness during lockdown. The Sunday Times saying that French bulldog puppies are being sold for up to £4,000 each on one website, when a buyer could normally expect to pay less than £2,500. Even £2,500 seems like an awful lot of money. Cockapoos, one of my personal favourites, are going for up to £3,500, about double the usual price. One vet says prices have shot up, and this vet, Mark Abraham's, concerned that some breeders may be raising animals unethically in order to maximise profits. And the Dogs Trust, the charity, says that the number of inquiries from people looking to rehome a rescue dog is up more than 700% on the same period last year. But as every dog owner knows, looking after an animal, particularly a dog, is a big undertaking. So the message of the Sunday Times story is, remember, a dog is for life and not just for lockdown.
Clever. Tim?
Yeah, I want to say Eid Mubarak. Lovely hearing Mona Aoma talking about her preparations here, because the Huffington Post says Eid isn't cancelled. We're all going to dress up and make it joyous. We know that it's the end of Ramadan. Worldwide Muslims are trying to celebrate, and it is usually a joyous occasion. Brightly coloured new outfits, food and communal festivities. But the Huffington Post hones in on Ali Amla from Huddersfield, and he says it's like having a month of real hardship and toil without the celebration at the end. It does feel like a real sacrifice not to have the momentous occasion as we know it. His 9-year-old daughter and 8-year-old son will miss seeing their grandparents, cousins and their aunties and uncles, but he's planning to virtually connect with his sisters and their families so that everyone can see each other. Food, of course, we heard that was important, and he's making a big pot of biryani, baking and decorating the home. It's all going to be online. And it's great. I'm sure we've all done the Zoom family meetings. But I think in something as important that this is going to be different, I'm just hoping that people can really enjoy it.
I hope so too. Stuart, Tim, thank you very much indeed. You can listen again to this programme on the BBC Sounds app for music, radio and podcasts.